Welcome. Before we dive into this incredible story, tell me where you're watching from and make sure to subscribe because we've spent countless hours uncovering the true events behind this story. This is the story of Daniel, a young man in 1858 who witnessed the unimaginable, his family being sold into slavery, and yet, against all odds, he risked everything to save them. What he did defied logic, courage, and the harshest realities of his time. Daniel's early life was shaped by a rare closeness to his family, a bond that went far beyond the ordinary ties of parent and child, or siblings. Born on a modest farm in Alabama, he grew up surrounded by his parents, two younger sisters, and an older brother, all of whom relied on each other not just for survival, but for companionship and hope in a world that sought to strip them of both. Even as a child, Daniel displayed a sharp mind and a courageous spirit, often standing up for his siblings when disagreements arose among the other children on the plantation. His parents instilled in him not only the skills necessary to navigate the harsh labor imposed upon them, but also the unspoken lessons of resilience, patience, and careful observation, qualities that would later define his daring attempts to protect his family. Every day, Daniel and his family worked side by side in the fields, tending crops and performing chores that were exhausting but instilled a sense of unity. The family had small routines that created moments of normalcy amid the cruelty of their environment. Daniel's mother would tell stories at night, quietly passing down the history of their ancestry, reminding the children of the strength embedded in their lineage. His father taught him practical skills, how to read subtle changes in the overseer's behavior, how to manage tools for maximum efficiency, and, most importantly, how to anticipate danger before it struck. These skills, though seemingly mundane at the time, became the foundation for the daring actions he would undertake as a teenager. Daniel's bond with his sisters was particularly strong. He took it upon himself to shield them from verbal abuse whenever he could, often redirecting attention or negotiating small mercies from the overseers. In return, his sisters looked to him for guidance and reassurance. This mutual reliance formed a quiet yet unbreakable network of emotional support that made the family feel like more than just a group of enslaved individuals. They were a unit, a small pocket of resistance against the dehumanization imposed on them. Even in moments of punishment, when the whip cracked across the fields, or when rations were unfairly withheld, Daniel's leadership within the family gave them a sense of safety, however fleeting. His early friendships with other enslaved children on neighboring plots also contributed to his understanding of trust and loyalty. While he played games and shared small secrets, he learned who could be trusted, who might betray a word, and how to read people, lessons that would later become essential when navigating the dangerous path toward rescuing his family. These experiences nurtured both caution and cunning in Daniel, balancing a child's innocence with an early awareness of the harsh realities around him. Even as a boy, Daniel had dreams beyond the plantation. He imagined a life where his family could remain together, free from the constant threat of sale or separation. He secretly mapped out the land, noting hidden paths, the river's bends, and forested areas that could serve as hiding spots. These early observations, done as a playful curiosity at first, later became vital for planning movements that had the potential to outwit overseers and slave traders. Perhaps the most defining element of Daniel's early life was the strength of his moral compass. He understood, even as a child, that the cruelty inflicted on his family was unjust. He harbored a quiet determination to challenge it when the time came, not through direct confrontation as a child, for he knew the dangers of impulsivity, but through careful thought and patience, preparing himself mentally for the impossible tasks that lay ahead. In essence, Daniel's early years were a blend of tenderness, education, and resilience. The love, trust, and strategic thinking cultivated in those formative years shaped not only the man he would become, but also the extraordinary courage that would drive him to confront the unthinkable. These early experiences were the bedrock upon which every daring move to protect his family would later be built, a preparation invisible to the world, but crucial to his survival and eventual heroism. The day Daniel's world shattered began like any other, with the sun rising over the fields and the rhythmic sounds of work echoing across the plantation. But that morning carried a heaviness no one could have predicted. Daniel awoke to the tense whispers of older slaves and the harsh commands of the overseer, a voice that had always been a part of his daily life, but now seemed charged with something darker. As he made his way to the fields, he noticed unfamiliar men standing near the main house, men in fine coats and stiff collars, their eyes cold and calculating. Daniel immediately felt a sinking dread in his chest, though he could not yet name it. It wasn't long before the overseer called the family together, insisting that the master wanted to see them immediately. Fear gripped Daniel's heart as he glanced at his parents and siblings, who mirrored his unease. The master, a stern man who had rarely shown either kindness or cruelty beyond the norms of plantation life, now looked unusually grim. The words that fell from his mouth shattered Daniel's very understanding of the world. His family was to be sold. Daniel could barely comprehend it. His parents' eyes, usually filled with quiet strength, were now clouded with helpless sorrow. His younger sisters clutched each other, shivering in terror. His older brother's jaw was clenched so tightly that Daniel could see the strain in his face. Daniel felt a mix of rage and despair. Rage at the injustice and despair, because he knew there was little a boy his age could do against the machinery of slavery, against the cold commerce that treated his loved ones as property. The separation was swift. His family was packed onto wagons, each member placed with strangers who would take them miles away to markets and auctions. Daniel's parents tried to console him, whispering instructions and promises, their voices breaking with emotion. His mother pressed a small cloth into his hand, telling him to remember her scent, to keep hope alive, and to never give up. The sound of the wagon wheels creaking and the distant cries of his sisters as they were driven apart was a memory that Daniel would carry with him forever, a searing, painful mark of injustice that would fuel his resolve. Left behind, Daniel was temporarily paralyzed by grief. He wandered the plantation in a daze, avoiding the overseer's questioning eyes and the curious stares of other slaves. Every corner of the land he had known as home now seemed alien and hostile. The familiar trees, the fields where he had worked side by side with his siblings, now felt like cages that had failed to protect his family. Each breath he drew seemed heavy, burdened by the weight of helplessness and fury. Yet within that grief, a spark of determination began to form. Daniel refused to accept that his family's fate was sealed. He knew the system was vast and ruthless, But he also knew he had qualities others might underestimate. His knowledge of the land, his ability to observe and plan quietly, and a resilience that had been nurtured through years of hardship and careful attention to his surroundings. Every whispered conversation, every glance at the distant roads where his family had disappeared, became a point of calculation. He began to map in his mind the paths the wagons might take, the rivers to follow, and the likely markets where his family could be sold. Daniel also sought allies among the other enslaved people and sympathetic workers on the plantation. Though fearful themselves, some recognized the determination in his eyes and offered small pieces of information. Who had left for town that morning, which routes traders favored, and which paths might be less guarded. Each tidbit of information became a vital piece of a larger puzzle that Daniel would rely on in the days to come. As the sun set that evening, Daniel sat in the fading light, silent except for the occasional whisper of his mother's words. Her hope became his fuel, her courage his guide. He made a silent vow that no matter the risks, no matter the obstacles, he would find a way to reunite with his family. The sheer brutality of the sale, a transaction that stripped his family of their names, their dignity, and their togetherness, became not just a wound, but a call to action. That night, Daniel began to plan. He visualized routes, imagined scenarios, and considered the dangers he would face: armed traders, wild terrain, and the constant threat of discovery. He studied the rhythms of the plantation, the patterns of the overseers, and the behavior of passing traders. Every detail, no matter how small, became a potential advantage. The despair of that morning transformed into a quiet, burning determination. Though he was only a boy, Daniel's mind became a strategist's, carefully laying the groundwork for what would be an almost impossible mission: the rescue of the family that had been torn from him. In those first hours after the sale, Daniel's world had shifted from one of routine oppression to a battlefield of survival, strategy, and hope. His grief, intense and all-consuming, became the crucible that forged his courage. From that day forward, nothing would deter him. Every thought, every action, every decision would be aimed at one goal: to defy all odds and save the family that had been taken from him. That day, though marked by loss, became the beginning of a journey that would test his courage, his intelligence, and his humanity in ways that few could ever imagine. Daniel's first attempts to plan a rescue were filled with both urgency and caution. He knew that acting recklessly could not only doom him, but also put his family in even greater danger. Every move had to be calculated, every alley carefully chosen. In the first days after the sale, he observed the plantation and its surroundings with a meticulous eye. He watched the traders come and go, noting their habits, the timing of their deliveries, and the routes they used to transport slaves to distant markets. Every detail, no matter how small, became a critical piece of intelligence. He memorized the river bends, the hidden paths through dense woods, and even the schedules of patrols and overseers, knowledge that would later prove essential in tracking his family's movements. Daniel began reaching out discreetly to others who might help. Among the enslaved workers, he sought those he could trust, people who had shown courage, loyalty, or cunning in past incidents. He learned quickly that trust was a rare commodity. A single misstep could betray him and his mission. But some were willing to share what they knew. One older man, who had once evaded capture himself, provided guidance on moving through the forests unseen, while a woman who had relatives in nearby towns offered information about the likely markets his family could be sent to. These small acts of solidarity were vital, not just for intelligence, but for giving Daniel the courage to believe that the rescue could succeed. Every night, Daniel would retreat to a quiet corner of the plantation and map out his plan in his mind. He visualized the roads, imagining each wagon and the guards surrounding it. He considered the obstacles he might face, the unpredictability of the traders, the dangers of the terrain, and the risk of being caught and punished. He thought about how to distract the overseers, how to create diversions, and even how to negotiate if the situation demanded it. Each hypothetical scenario strengthened his resolve and prepared him for the physical and mental demands of the mission. Despite the careful planning, Daniel faced moments of doubt and fear. The sheer scale of what he was attempting, a boy going up against a system designed to crush him, was overwhelming. He feared for his safety, for the lives of his allies, and most of all, for his family. The thought of failure, of returning to the plantation with nothing but despair, haunted him. Yet, each time fear threatened to paralyze him, he recalled his family's faces, their hope, their suffering, and the bond that tied them together. That memory fueled him, transforming fear into focus, hesitation into determination. Daniel also learned to be patient. He realized that timing would be everything. Acting too early or too openly could alert the traders and overseers, putting his family at even greater risk. He waited for the right moment, observing patterns, learning the routines of those around him, and quietly testing the boundaries of what he could do without drawing attention. He began small, sending messages to allies, leaving discreet signals for those who could help, and noting any signs that his family might still be reachable. Each small step, each minor success, bolstered his confidence and sharpened his skills. As the weeks passed, Daniel's reputation among those who knew him grew. Though young, he was becoming known for his cleverness and courage. Others whispered about the boy who refused to accept the sale of his family, a boy who was planning something impossible. Some admired him quietly, offering support in secret, while others feared the consequences if his plans were discovered. These dynamics created both opportunities and dangers, forcing Daniel to navigate not just physical obstacles but social ones as well. By the time he was ready to act, Daniel had transformed from a frightened boy into a strategist capable of facing incredible risks. His planning was thorough, his allies carefully chosen, and his knowledge of the land and routines of the traders unmatched. What had begun as a desperate desire to reunite with his family had evolved into a meticulously constructed mission. Every step he had taken, every observation, every conversation, every night spent mapping routes in his mind, had prepared him for the moment when he would move to rescue the people he loved most. This stage of Daniel's journey was defined not by action, but by preparation. It was the crucible in which his courage, intelligence, and determination were forged. Without these careful, deliberate steps, the daring rescue that would come later might have been impossible. In those quiet, tense days of planning, Daniel proved that even in the most oppressive circumstances, strategy, patience, and unwavering commitment could create the foundation for defying the odds. Daniel's journey to reach his family was a perilous one from the very beginning. As he left the familiar confines of the plantation, Each step took him further into unknown territory, dense forests, open fields patrolled by overseers, and roads watched by traders with sharp eyes and quicker tempers. The landscape that had once seemed ordinary now became a labyrinth of danger. Every rustle in the bushes, every crack of a twig beneath his feet, threatened to expose him. He moved mostly at night, using the cover of darkness to hide from those who would see him captured or killed. His knowledge of hidden paths, river bends, and forest clearings became invaluable, allowing him to avoid the main routes and detection by patrolling guards. Along the way, Daniel faced natural dangers that were as threatening as human ones. Rivers swollen from spring rains required him to find hidden crossings or risk drowning. Swarms of insects and the constant exposure to the elements tested his endurance. Nights were bitterly cold, while days were hot and exhausting. Hunger and fatigue became constant companions, but the thought of his family kept him moving. Every ache, every blister, every moment of despair was outweighed by the vision of reuniting with the people he loved. Human threats were even more dangerous. Slave catchers and traders were a constant presence on the roads, vigilant for anyone attempting escape. Daniel had to anticipate their patrols and tactics, sometimes hiding for hours in hollow trees or dense underbrush. He also encountered townsfolk and travelers who were either indifferent or hostile, any one of whom could have revealed his movements. Each encounter demanded quick thinking, improvisation, and sometimes outright courage to bluff his way past suspicion. At one point, Daniel narrowly avoided being captured by a group of traders who had stopped at a crossroads. Using the shadows and his knowledge of the terrain, he slipped away undetected, heart pounding, and continued on his path. Along the journey, Daniel also relied heavily on the network of allies he had cultivated during his planning. They provided critical information about the routes his family had likely been taken along, the timing of sales, and even temporary places to hide and rest. Some risked their own safety to leave supplies, bread, water, and occasionally a warm cloak in concealed spots along the path. Without these small acts of solidarity, the journey would have been impossible. Yet even with their help, Daniel had to move mostly alone, relying on stealth, instinct, and courage to evade capture. Every step brought new emotional challenges. The thought of what his family might be enduring, sold to strangers, forced into harsh labor, possibly torn apart further, weighed heavily on him. Daniel had to balance urgency with caution, knowing that rushing could lead to disaster. He constantly rehearsed possible scenarios in his mind. What he would do if he encountered a trader, how he would protect his siblings, how to navigate unfamiliar towns without attracting attention. Each step was calculated, each decision life or death. As Daniel approached the locations where his family had likely been taken, the risks intensified. Slave markets were heavily guarded, with armed men and fierce dogs watching every entrance and exit. Any misstep could result in immediate recapture or worse. Daniel had to rely not only on his knowledge of the terrain and the routines of the traders, but also on his ability to read human behavior, noticing subtle cues, gauging when someone was distracted, and exploiting every opportunity to move undetected. The psychological strain was immense. Sleep deprived, constantly alert, and facing the constant threat of danger, Daniel had to maintain mental clarity and resolve. At times, despair threatened to overtake him, but memories of his family, his mother's soothing voice, his sister's laughter, and the sight of his father's steady eyes propelled him forward. It was a mixture of love, duty, and sheer determination that allowed him to continue despite exhaustion and fear. Every mile brought new lessons. He learned to trust his instincts completely, to observe and adapt, and to maintain patience even when progress seemed impossible. By the time he reached the outskirts of the first town, where his family might have been taken, Daniel was no longer the boy who had stood helpless as his family was sold. He had transformed into a calculated, resilient young man capable of navigating an environment that sought to crush him at every turn. Ultimately, the journey itself became a testament to his courage and resourcefulness. It was not just a physical trek, but a test of character, strategy, and perseverance. Each challenge he faced, rivers, patrols, treacherous terrain, and emotional strain, honed his abilities and steeled his resolve. By the time Daniel approached the final obstacles separating him from his family, he had become a figure shaped by hardship and determination, ready to confront the dangers that lay ahead and defy the odds that had once seemed insurmountable. Daniel's confrontations with slave traders, overseers, and local authorities were among the most dangerous moments of his journey, moments that could have ended everything he had worked toward in an instant. By the time he reached the towns and marketplaces where his family had likely been taken, he was acutely aware that he was stepping into a web of watchful eyes, armed men, and unforgiving systems designed to capture or punish anyone who dared resist. Every street, every doorway, every market stall presented both an opportunity and a threat. He had to move with extreme caution, balancing boldness with stealth. His first close encounter came at a bustling slave market on the outskirts of a small Alabama town. Daniel had observed the market from a distance for hours, noting the guards' rotations, the traders' routines, and the placement of the wagons that held enslaved people. With his heart pounding, he approached under the pretense of seeking work, blending into the crowd of laborers and buyers. Every movement had to appear natural. A single suspicious glance could alert the men in charge. As he scanned the crowd, his eyes finally fell on a wagon containing his younger sisters, huddled together, eyes wide with fear. For a brief moment, Daniel felt the surge of emotion that had driven him this far, but he forced himself to remain calm. When a trader noticed him lingering too close to the wagons, Daniel had to think quickly. He fabricated a story, speaking confidently about needing work to feed his family, while subtly guiding the trader's attention away from the wagon. The trader hesitated, suspicious but unthreatened by the boldness in Daniel's voice. It was a dangerous gamble, but Daniel's careful observation of human behavior allowed him to sense hesitation, which he used to his advantage. By blending in, moving with confidence, and maintaining a composed demeanor, he avoided immediate capture, though the close call left him shaken and even more determined. Over the next few days, Daniel faced repeated confrontations with overseers and traders. On one occasion, he had to physically maneuver around a group of men, blocking the path to another holding area where he believed his family had been taken. Using the shadows and hidden alleys, he slipped past them, but not without being seen by one vigilant overseer. Daniel froze, holding his breath, his mind racing. The overseer glanced in his direction, suspicion flickering in his eyes, but then turned away, distracted by a delivery of goods. That narrow escape reinforced the importance of patience, timing, and reading the intentions of those around him. Authorities posed a different kind of challenge. In towns, sheriffs and constables were charged with maintaining order, often enforcing the laws that allowed slave traders to operate without impediment. Daniel had to navigate their presence carefully, sometimes pretending to perform menial work, sometimes moving at night when patrols were lighter. Each interaction with these men carried the risk of exposure and punishment. In one encounter, a local constable asked Daniel why he was traveling without a master's permission. Thinking quickly, he concocted a story about seeking a job for his master, relying on the authority figures' assumptions to deflect suspicion. The man allowed him to continue, unaware that Daniel's mission was far more personal and urgent than the simple errands he claimed. Physical confrontations were rare but unavoidable. In one particularly tense situation, a trader attempted to seize Daniel, suspicious of his presence near the wagons. Daniel had to rely on quick reflexes and knowledge of the terrain. Ducking into a narrow alleyway and using crates and carts for cover, he evaded capture. The trader shouted and pursued, but Daniel's preparation and nimbleness gave him the advantage. That moment crystallized the peril of his mission. He was not merely facing a legal or social system, but men who would not hesitate to use violence to protect their profits. Every confrontation tested Daniel's ingenuity. He learned to use misdirection, creating diversions to draw attention away from his movements. He leveraged small acts of deception, exploiting human assumptions and fears. At times, he relied on courage and bluffing, pretending to belong in areas where he had no right to be. Each successful maneuver bolstered his confidence, while each close call reminded him that one misstep could mean death or the permanent loss of his family. Through these encounters, Daniel's resolve only hardened. He understood that brute force alone could never succeed against those who had legal and physical authority. Instead, he relied on strategy, courage, and an almost instinctive understanding of human behavior. Each confrontation taught him patience, resilience, and the value of careful planning. He became not only a survivor, but a master of navigating danger under extreme pressure, skills that would ultimately determine whether his mission to save his family could succeed. By the time Daniel faced his final encounters near the locations where his family was held, he had transformed from a frightened boy into a calculated, resourceful, and courageous young man. He had survived close calls, outwitted armed men, and endured threats that would have crushed most adults. Every confrontation reinforced his determination, and with each success, he edged closer to the ultimate goal, reuniting with his family and defying the seemingly insurmountable odds stacked against him. Daniel's ultimate success in reuniting with his family was nothing short of extraordinary, a testament to his courage, resilience, and strategic brilliance. After weeks of careful observation, planning, and navigating dangerous terrain, he finally reached the area where his family was being held. By this point, he had not only memorized the routes and hiding spots, but had also gained a deep understanding of the guards' habits and the routines of the traders. Every small detail he had observed, every ally he had enlisted, and every diversion he had planned converged in this final moment of action. The reunion itself required meticulous timing. Daniel waited until nightfall, when the camp was quiet and most of the guards were asleep or distracted. Moving silently, he approached the holding area, careful to avoid detection. The moonlight provided just enough visibility for him to recognize his siblings and parents huddled together, frightened and exhausted. For a moment, he simply stood there, overwhelmed by the sight of them alive and within reach after enduring so much fear and uncertainty. But he quickly pushed aside emotion. There was no time for hesitation. Using the skills he had developed during his perilous journey, Daniel created distractions to draw guards away from the area. He set small fires in carefully chosen locations to create smoke and confusion, while signaling his allies to be ready to assist if necessary. Every movement had been rehearsed in his mind countless times, but the unpredictability of human behavior still made the rescue tense and nerve-wracking. Each second felt like an eternity as he moved closer to his family, whispering words of reassurance to calm their fear. When he finally reached them, Daniel acted quickly to guide them out of the holding area. His younger sisters clung to him, sensing the urgency, while his parents followed closely, trusting his judgment despite the danger. The path to safety was treacherous, uneven terrain, shadows that concealed potential threats, and the constant possibility of discovery. Yet Daniel's preparation allowed him to navigate these obstacles with precision. Every hidden path he had memorized, every diversion he had created, was now being put to the ultimate test. As they moved through the night, Daniel remained vigilant, scanning for signs of pursuit. He encouraged his family to remain silent, even when fear threatened to overwhelm them. Their survival depended on stealth as much as on courage. At moments when guards or traders appeared unexpectedly, Daniel used his quick thinking to hide the group, often pressing them into thick brush or behind tree trunks until the threat passed. His ability to remain calm under pressure inspired confidence in his family, helping them to follow without panic. The final leg of their journey was the most challenging. They had to cross a wide, shallow river to reach safety. The water cold and treacherous, threatening to slow them or make noise that could give away their position. Daniel led them carefully, ensuring that no one fell or made a sound. Each step was a balance between speed and caution, guided by his knowledge of the river's currents and hidden crossings. By dawn, they had reached the other side, exhausted but alive, a remarkable testament to Daniel's determination and resourcefulness. Once they were beyond immediate danger, Daniel guided his family to a remote location where they could rest and recover. Here, the enormity of what he had accomplished began to sink in. He had defied impossible odds, a young boy facing an entire system of oppression, outsmarting armed men, navigating dangerous terrain, and orchestrating a rescue that most adults would have deemed impossible. His family, though shaken, now had hope and a chance at a new life together, thanks to his unwavering courage and ingenuity. The legacy of Daniel's actions extended far beyond this daring rescue. Word of his bravery spread quietly among those who knew the truth, inspiring others to find courage in the face of oppression. His story became a symbol of hope, resourcefulness, and the unbreakable bonds of family, proving that even in the darkest circumstances, determination and love could triumph over cruelty. Daniel's journey also underscored the importance of strategic thinking, patience, and resilience, qualities that allowed an ordinary boy to perform extraordinary acts. Even generations later, Daniel's story remained a powerful example of human courage and ingenuity. It was a reminder that the bonds of family could inspire acts of heroism that seemed impossible. His daring rescue not only saved lives, but also created a narrative of defiance and hope, leaving an enduring mark on those who heard it. Daniel had turned grief and helplessness into action, transforming despair into a mission that reshaped the fate of his loved ones. In the end, Daniel's courage and determination became his defining legacy. By facing dangers that no child should ever confront, navigating threats from men and nature alike, and executing a plan that required intelligence, bravery, and careful timing, he proved that the human spirit could rise above even the most brutal circumstances. His family survived, his actions inspired those around him, and his story became a testament to what can be accomplished when love, courage, and perseverance are combined in the face of overwhelming